Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say the suggestion that the chairman's statements, or that those of us who are concerned about climate change, is an overreaction. Well, look at the wildfires in the West. How many acres have to go up in smoke? Look at the flooding in Kentucky. How many lives has to be lost? Look at the droughts in the Midwest, where farmers are producing a fraction of the crop that they would normally produce. Our colleague, Senator Tester, was talking about how on his farm he can't produce as much as he used to because of climate change. Look at the cattle ranchers who are selling their cattle prematurely because they don't even know if they can keep them alive. And look at the Northeasters that we get on the East Coast. And I could go on and on. These are tectonic shifts that are affecting our very lives and livelihood. And that's an overreaction? I think Mother Nature is not overreacting. She's sending us a message. Flooding is one of the most expensive and most frequent natural disasters in the United States, and climate change is only going to intensify these events. And it's critical that our communities are prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. In New Jersey, we're leveraging federal resources from community development block grants to build state-of-the-art resilient infrastructure like Hoboken's Rebuild by Design. This $230 million mitigation initiative, which I helped secure funding for, will help alleviate repetitive flooding and protect against damage from storm surges. And for every dollar we invest in mitigation, the federal government saves $6 in disaster relief spending. So, Dr. Vashala, shouldn't the federal government be investing more in innovative, large-scale flood resilience projects like the Rebuild by Design and, in general, on mitigation to reduce damages for the costly disaster aid that subsequently comes forth?
Absolutely, Senator. I think the costs of inaction far outweigh the costs of any overreaction. And the Hoboken example is an excellent one. The work in Hoboken to reinforce the coast, the water system, and build public infrastructure like beautiful new parks is also going to protect the local hospital that was under many feet of water after Hurricane Sandy. And so I think we are failing to make the connections to where the positive benefits spread through the rest of society in reducing costs in the healthcare system, for example.
Well, I appreciate that. 6-to-1, I'd be willing to make investments in anything that gives me a 6-to-1 rate of return. And that's what mitigation does. That's why I introduced the bipartisan NFIP REACT, which supercharges billions of dollars for pre-disaster mitigation and resilience in the nation's most flood-prone areas. And I hope we can get to that, because that's going to not only save us money and save lives, it's also going to create a lot of jobs along the way. I've long been a vocal advocate for mass transit in my home state of New Jersey and across the country, and I'm proud of the work the committee's done under the leadership of Chairman Brown to advance federal investments in our transit systems, including the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill signed into law last year. And as a former mayor, I've seen firsthand the transformational effect that access to transit can have on a community. But transit impacts go beyond just economics. The fact is, every transit dollar we spend is also, in my view, a climate dollar. Mr. Florida, what role do you see transit playing in our communities as we decarbonize our economy?
Well, Senator Menendez, as a former mayor, you know that transit systems can be the lifeblood of a city. They help us become more connected, give workers access to jobs, and bring together economies in areas that didn't have bridges connecting each other before. As we work with Ohio communities, one of the key recommendations we have is to invest in mass transit. As you know, mass transit, as you said, every investment we make there is a climate dollar. Every dollar we invest there is a climate dollar. Mass transit is a far less carbon-intensive way of transportation than single occupancy vehicles. And as we also know, transportation is now the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, the largest economic sector emitting greenhouse gas emissions in the United States.
Yeah. So taking off from that, how will creating more livable, walkable communities help not only to lower greenhouse gas emissions and promote sustainability, but also reduce costs for consumers and promote affordability? This is the essence of something I call the Livable Communities Act, where we try to look at both the housing needs that exist. We had a hearing the other day in our country, and at the same time create the linkages to existing infrastructure on transit and that create access to jobs. What's your view on that?
One of the key areas we work with Ohio communities on is to make their communities more livable and walkable, and this means central planning, as you discussed. It helps ensure that we're preserving public health and have access to green space. It is a critical piece of our sustainability future. But I think I want to point to your example on reducing costs, because I think this is a really important one, and one that you all are considering with the Inflation Reduction Act. The technology and the economics have now aligned, where we have opportunity to invest in technologies that will reduce our emissions and save us money, save consumers money. But this is not as easy as it sounds. We're fighting up against incumbent industries that have been at it for generations. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that they have that barrier to entry lowered and that they can get into the market. And so I think this is a really important point that you all are investing in and encourage that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.